All right, I'd like to call the meeting for Community Relations and Student Life, Safety and Wellness Committee, meeting for Monday, January 10th to order. And first thing would be, is there any public comment on the agenda?
There is not.
All right, then I'm going to toss it on over to my friend Karen Burke. Have a great time.
Why, thank you, Mrs. Peduzzi. Good evening, everybody, again. Let's see, the first item on the agenda, there are 3 items, actually, that we're going to be discussing this evening. Our health and safety plan with regards to COVID. Also, Montgomery County Office of Public Health updates regarding COVID. And adult evening school winter spring session updates. So we'll start with our health and safety plan discussions. As you may or may not know, and I'm going to toss it over to you in a second, we do need to file with the state and the county what our plans are for COVID and how we plan, what mitigation efforts we are putting into place, as well as any other things that we are doing, including testing. And we have done that, and as we change in accordance with updated guidelines, we do need to submit those changes as well and get them approved. So if there's something that you would like to share with regard, since I know you have a very close relationship with the Office of Public Health.
Sure. I do. The board received some emails prior to the break, and I've received some about our masking requirement. So from an historical perspective, on August 9th, the board passed a motion to approve our health and safety plan, which, if you look at Section A on page 7 of the plan, it says that masks are required for all indoor activities, except there are a few exceptions if students are participating in physical activities such as basketball practice, things like that. But masking is required for all students, staff, and visitors, and we've really limited visitors. That was approved on August 9th. The motion also allowed the board provided the superintendent's office with the power to modify it. Well, I told the board at that time, while I appreciated that support, the reality is any decision we need to make as a group of 10. And so while we've received some requests prior to Omicron really taking a strong hold, not only in our area, but throughout the country, we have some requests, and some districts have decided to lift the masking requirement and make it either optional or recommended, seems to be a popular term. So that's the history. I have no intention, while we are in high transmission, to move to an optional masking requirement. But I did tell the folks that emailed the board and emailed me that it would be a topic of discussion at the January 20th meeting. And I also said it would be a topic of discussion at the Community Relations and Student Life meeting for discussion with the board. There are some districts that have picked dates in the spring where they are hoping to go mask optional, which I think is a possibility. But in the past 4 weeks, we've just seen the exponential growth of cases. Our incident rate in the district, which is published on a weekly basis by the Office of Public Health and the County COVID Hub, is over 600 cases per 100,000 residents. The positivity rate is in the upper teens, if not 20% or higher. So we are all hoping that this variant leaves as quickly as it arrived. And hopefully there's some data that shows that. But January we know is going to be tough. February hopefully lesser. And I'm really hoping in the spring we can go mass optional. So I was going to give the board a big presentation tonight about all the different options you can consider. We need to keep masking. There are some folks, and I respect their opinions, I don't agree with them, that feel maybe they just don't believe in the premise that masks help mitigate the spread. Is it perfect? No. Are there times where kids have them off? Yes. Are there times I've had mine off? Certainly. When the kids are out at recess and they come in, they're great. They're catching their breath, they're running around, they get them up as soon as they can. We spread them out as much as we can at lunch. We're doing the best we can. It's not perfect, and we do get cases. But I believe in the premise that masks help prevent the spread of the virus, and I think we need to support that. I am willing to recommend that we move to mask recommended if we have a minimum of 2 consecutive weeks of low or moderate transmission. And to further explain, we need to look at both the positivity rate and the incident rate, particularly the incident rate. If one of them is still substantial or high, then we consider us as a district still substantial or high. If both are moderate or low, then we can consider mask optional. From an anecdotal approach, I know Souderton School District recently, about 2 weeks ago, went mask optional, and they're reporting to me that most people are still wearing them. But that's one district, and I respect the decision they made. It's not one that I'm comfortable making right now. And most districts in our area, I think, are still requiring them from talking with my colleague. But any motion that I would recommend to the board next week on Thursday would be that we see 2 consecutive weeks of low or moderate transmission to consider mask optional for our students. I certainly hear people are saying about their students struggle with masking throughout the day, that it's prohibitive and inhibits their speech. Some kids are struggling, they want to see their teacher's face. We all want to see that. We have tough decisions to make. I was asked to do a survey, and I'm not inclined to do a survey, not because I certainly understand parents' rights in their children's health, but this board is tasked with making decisions for 5,200 students. So I don't really believe, not that I'm not willing to do a survey, I'm just not sure what that would do for us. We are tasked as a team of 10 with protecting 5,200 students. And so I think we have to make, and you're elected by the community, I think we need to make these tough decisions. So that's my recommendation for any change to our health and safety plan at this time. Any questions?
I just have a question with respect to N95 masks and the PPE that the district has gotten in the past. Do we have N95s for our staff? Or, there's been a lot of questions lately about the effectiveness of masks that are not N95 and whether they're really as effective as we want them to be. So I don't know what the availability is like. I don't know if there was discussion amongst the county health departments about, trying to move into an N95 to try to mitigate, or just keep what we have because we can't get N95. So I'm just wondering what your thoughts are on that.
Sure. There's a lot of discussion, and there's been discussion specifically cloth versus another type of material. We have some N95s. We have some KN95s, which is what I'm wearing right now. And if our staff requests a specific one, we do our best to accommodate that. And then we have throughout the district in offices right across the hall there, as people come in, we have the surgical masks as well, which are considered better than cloth. So nothing's perfect, but there's, just like there is a challenge to get rapid tests right now, there's a challenge to get other PPE.
In regards to accessing rapid testing and the reporting that we are receiving from the community, are we only looking at PCRs administered by health facilities or at-home tests if somebody can get them? Do those count into our numbers as well?
I'm sorry, I couldn't hear everything you said.
Yeah, I was wondering, if somebody takes an at-home test, if they're able to access an at-home test at this point, and they take one, does that count into our numbers, or are we only counting, when we look at our overall numbers, the PCR tests or the rapid tests that are done at an actual health facility?
No, we count everything. Anything that's reported to us, we count. And we really appreciate, we had parents that notified us during the winter break, throughout the winter break, really from December 26th on, we had daily emails from folks so that we could, and if you look at the, I know our website struggled, but we sent a district communication, and the website is mostly back up. We tried to differentiate for families so they knew how many cases we had that were reported to us. But we also wanted to make sure people know who was in school and when they were last in school. Not the names, obviously, of the individuals, but, for example, the high school, I think, had 111 cases approximately, but many of those students were not in school since December 23rd. And then we have a second chart going, and eventually that'll go back to one chart. But we report everything that's reported to us, plus what we do. We also provided, Karen will get into test to stay momentarily, but we provided assurance testing for our faculty the 2 days before the break, and then again today, and that's been ongoing. And that's been well attended, very well attended. In the fall, we were getting very little participation, but today we tested the cabinet tested about 100 staff members today, and we did about 250, 300 before the break.
Quick question on the survey. So in the absence of doing a survey, do we have recorded data from maybe the teachers in the classroom in regards to what the students are saying? I mean, I think we hear a lot from parents, but do we have any recorded data from the teachers indicating what their students are saying about masks?
Not recorded data, more anecdotal. I think our students have been very resilient. I think they're happy to be in school 5 days a week, and we are really happy to see them 5 days a week. They definitely like their breaks. And our phys ed teachers, I asked them to stay outside as long as they could, and obviously we've hit a wall there. But they make sure they design activities where the kids are spread out and then go to different stations, and if they need a break, they get one. And we say it every month. Our nurses are just doing a fantastic job providing those breaks. So, and then I can tell you from helping out with lunch duty in here, because this is the bistro during the day, just chatting with the kids. They love at lunch being able to take their masks off and see their friends. But I ask them how their classes are going. They're going well, and they're definitely very much into giving me their opinions on snow days nowadays. So masking is not in the top five right now. I got a couple opinions today on why Friday was a school day and not a snow day. So somebody pointed to them what my other role is in the district. So they all called me over today to let me know.
I did notice that you were not the voice on that call.
I was not. I'm usually the voice.
Just saying.
Jess took one for the team.
I have two comments. The first is about the survey, in that we surveyed, almost 2 years ago, now a year and a half ago, because we had to make decisions based on what someone's decision was going to be with regard to in-school, virtual, hybrid, all of those things. So we surveyed when that was going to affect how we were going to instruct our children and how our teachers were going to proceed. So we have surveyed when necessary. So I think we're all in agreement. I would assume that, a survey and requests that some of the parents are expressing their need for isn't going to affect, how we're going to continue to do instruction. So therefore, it's a little bit of, as you said, a decision that the 10 of us should be making. So just sort of supporting what your point was there, that, yes, we will survey when we feel necessary, but we just, don't feel like this is the time to do that or the need to. And then the second thing is, and I'm Googling it as we speak, I was about to ask it and figured I'd ask Google myself, was, the CDC has their parameters, for the transmission rates as low, moderate, high, substantial, all of those things. And what I'm curious about is, might they change those parameters because the Omicron is so much more, contagious and stuff like that? It doesn't appear that they are. But that was going to be my only question as to if we were going to say 2 consecutive weeks at, a low to moderate rate, then just to make sure that, whatever. But it doesn't appear that they're going to change that. It just makes me nervous that we're never going to get under the positivity rate because it is so highly transmissible, though not hospitalization rates are going up. So that would be my only thought is if there might be another parameter that might be a little asterisks in there, with regard to the severity, and taking into account how many of our staff and students are vaccinated. Just throwing that out there, if that might come into play with any of our our thoughts with.
It's an excellent point, and that's why we're including moderate in there. I agree with you, Mrs. Peduzzi, that getting to low, and actually the Montgomery County Office of Public Health's chart of what is low, moderate, substantial, and high is actually, I think, more stringent than what the CDC is. They're very close, but I think it's more stringent. Low is very hard to achieve on incident rate. It has to be 10 cases per 100,000, and I think we achieved it maybe 2 or 3 weeks all of 2021, and that was like late June into July. So that was when we lifted the masks for our summer programming, if you remember. So that's why we're including low to moderate. And why moderate now? Great, it's a good question. Because we have more tools than we had a year ago. Vaccination is available to everybody. We're offering a booster clinic for our 12 and ups on the 19th with Eric's Pharmacy. We just had 1,200 5 to 12-year-olds through the building before the winter break for their vaccines. So, and while that's not a panacea, it's a wonderful tool that we have that we didn't have a year ago. And I think the biggest thing is really to watch the next 30 days, everything that I've been reading, and I am by far an expert, but everything I'm reading is really watching the next 30 days, and hopefully this variant leaves as quickly as it arrived, and we move to an endemic versus a pandemic. So I don't foresee us being in moderate at least until we get out of the winter. But hey, if it comes earlier, hey, I'd be elated. We all would be.
Two questions. One is with respect to the vaccinations amongst our K to 5 or K to 3, really. Do we have any idea the percentage of that yet? And that's my first question. And then the second question is, when we put out in the fall for parents to choose whether they wanted to do the I use virtual schooling for their children versus being in person, we left that choice for the first semester, correct? We're soon getting to that threshold. Are we offering it again? Do we have a plan for notifying the public about what that's going to look like?
So the first question is, we announced to families right after the break that they are able to enter their child's vaccination status into the portal. So we're still collecting that data, but I know we had 1,200 at our own clinic, slightly under 1,200. So that's about, there's 2,200 to 2,300 elementary students. So that's about 60% right there. And so we'll also get a chart from Eric's Pharmacy of how many attended. So we have that data. I would suspect we're in the 70% range, because I know families also went on their own if they were able to get a date sooner than what the date we offered. Could be higher. And then secondly, we only have a handful. We have several. We did it by trimester at the elementary level and by semester at the secondary level to go into Edgenuity. And so we have only a handful of families that chose to remain, and they're staying in there, and we have not entered additional people into it. The goal is to continue to offer in-person learning.
I was just curious, with Omicron being like everywhere, if that had changed in terms of the interest for the...
There hasn't. There's been some interest for us to go back to not hybrid, but just give people the option to come in or not, and that's really taxing on our staff. They did a great job last year, and as I said at the beginning of this year, we're trying to move away from that. We're one of the few districts in the area where if you test positive or you're a close contact on a bus, we as a team felt like we couldn't just have you home for 7 days doing asynchronous work. And so when we have a situation where somebody's been forced to isolate, we turn the camera on in that class, that particular section, so the child can stream and make a connection. But last year, you saw what our attendance was at the middle and high school. You just can't have folks on a Friday saying, I'm not coming in, turn the camera on. And and at the elementary level, it's really hard too for material pickups, and they use so many manipulatives and everything. So it's tough. I get it. We get a lot of requests, and one day I got a request to take masks off, to go virtual, to go hybrid, to stay the same. And I'm not trying to be sarcastic, but that literally, it does happen. I get it. everybody has COVID fatigue. And so we're doing our best to keep kids in school, keep them as safe as possible. And there's several health agencies that just stress how important it is to try to keep schools open in the second year, beyond the second year of the pandemic. And that there's even a school of thought that when students are home, they run a greater risk of transmission because of, I'm sure folks are having daycare issues and helping watch each other's children. It's hard. I get it. It's very hard. So none of our decisions are made lightly, but they are tough decisions.
Dr. Christian, quick question. You mentioned for the clinic that it was 12 and up. I believe the email said 12 to 15. Is that incorrect?
We're going to correct that.
Okay.
We did originally say 12 to 15, and then we realized, wait, there's probably some high school kids who didn't get boosted yet. So we checked with Eric's Pharmacy, and they're good to go.
Okay, thank you.
The email that went out to parents did show that it was 12 and up.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I think the copy that the board got first had 12 to 15, and then we later corrected it
Okay,
before
thank
it went
you.
out. So
Sorry, I didn't read the second one.
that's okay.
And I got to, Jess has been a great asset to the district. She and Gerald have worked very closely together on our initiative on Martin Luther King Jr. Day. I know Jess organized that up in her former district, and then she also I gave her the task. She didn't realize that when you get that assignment, all other duties as assigned, that she'd be organizing vaccine clinics. But anytime I ask her to do something, she says, "Okay, I'll get right on it," and she does. We really appreciate the hard work, and those clinics that we held before the break were fantastic. If that didn't put anybody in a good spirit going into winter break, I'm not sure what does.
It was really like a warm and fuzzy feeling seeing so many families come out and be able to greet them and say hello and everything. So it was great.
And Joe Lally and his team, I think they took every set of bubbles out of the dollar store possible. He gave out stickers, he gave out bubbles, he gave out lollipops. He was like the master of ceremonies.
Can he do balloon animals?
I don't think so. He was definitely more popular than the people giving the shots, that's for sure. The kids kept saying, "Where's the guy with the stickers?"
The Latin teacher makes balloon animals. He does as a side thing. You can have.
Oh, does he really?
Oh yeah, he's really good. Really, really good.
Next pandemic.
Yeah.
Next pandemic.
Yeah.
Sorry, bad comment. Well, end of the year parties, we'll invite him. Mrs. Burke, now we have something that's going to be really easy to explain.
Oh, gosh.
We gave you paper copies,
All right,
and Mrs. Burke provided a Cliff Notes version.
all right, at least it's colorful. Okay, I can't, all right. So this very colorful sheet, which is provided to us as Mrs. Moore so adeptly pointed out, in a font that could not possibly be made smaller, is the most hot off the press, up-to-date version.
Okay.
Which is January 6th. Now, being that today is the 10th, you know what that means? That probably as we sit here, it's being updated or has already been updated.
They're taking lessons from the computer industry as soon as they make it.
Yeah, I mean, it was updated on January 3rd, and as soon as we put that out, I got an email saying this has been updated. What I did to help you understand, or help all of us, including me, understand what the changes were, was I took the information that's on this very colorful chart and turned it into a more boring chart.
Oh.
However, where it is highlighted in red font, those are the changes, the most recent changes that have taken place. Okay? So really the biggest change of all is that the magic number for quarantine has dropped from 10 to 5. And that has affected a number of things. So if you'll indulge me, we can take some time and go through it so I can explain what I understand to be some of the nuances. I don't I'm not even making believe that I understand it all. Every now and then, Dr. Christian will get a text from me saying, wait, I'm confused again. Does it mean this or does it mean that? And because it is so confusing. So, right now, the top row that talks about the symptoms and the recommendations for the symptoms, that has not changed recently. So by recent, I mean, we'll say since the winter break. That's not to say that it won't change tomorrow. I'm not promising anything. Under isolation requirements, now, I do remember asking, what is the difference between isolation and quarantine? So isolation refers to somebody who has tested positive. Quarantining refers to someone who has been exposed to someone who is positive. Okay, so that's the major difference. It only took me 3 months to understand.
Well, isolation, you have to isolate. You have to be more alone. Whereas quarantining, you have to
except
stay.
the county has finally come to the conclusion that in families, while it's a nice thought, it is really not a very pragmatic suggestion. And it is not a reality for a very large percentage of the population. So they've become a little more relaxed with those requests and those mandates, if you will. So under isolation, if you do a side-by-side, you'll see that students may return to school if they have symptoms. They may return to school after 24 hours with no fever and resolving symptoms. And here's where the change is, 5 days since the symptoms first appeared. The other change is that on days 6 through 10, the remaining half, students are to wear masks whenever they are around people. Okay? And when they say wearing masks, they mean well-fitting masks. Okay? Without symptoms, so a student who tested positive but does not have symptoms may return to school, and all of this is a change because it had been 10 days. Now it is 5 days after the specimen was collected. Masks have to be worn for the remaining 6 to 10. And if symptoms develop during those 5 days following, you have to then follow your the with symptoms column. Okay, so you revert back to that, and again, you start with fever-free, blah blah blah. All right, so you're going to refer to that. Any questions about that row? And as soon as you understand this, it's going to change. So.
Well, the 5 days, is it on the 5th day after the test? Or is the test day 0 or day 1?
I counted test day as 0. So when the symptoms start, you would start, that's your first day. But the day that you get the test, yeah, do you know the answer to that one? Because I counted it, and sometimes I get. Well, when the kids notify and parents notify our nurse,
Right.
Our school nurses are all on the same page with this. So and if you go down to the bottom here of this chart, this is something that I discovered. I don't know if you can see it. It is on the right side, top quarantine and isolation calculator.
Oh.
If you put the dates in there, it will tell you when you can come back,
Okay.
which it is fabulous. So I tried it, and it does in fact work. Now, mind you, this is Tennessee, but right now Tennessee is doing the same things as we are because they're following the CDC guidelines. Okay?
Yeah, so if a person tests positive and 5 days after they test positive, they can return to school, and they wear a mask for days 6 to 10. If they develop symptoms on day 7, we go back to day 1. and we go back, they go back home, obviously, and we start back over with 5 days at home again. Okay.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay, so if it's,
Yeah, except
shoots and ladders, yeah.
well, the problem is you have to constantly walk around with this chart, which I did this entire weekend. Okay. Any other questions that I could sort of answer?
Just one. Siblings in the same household that attend our district, do they do anything different, or do they still follow this? Like, say, Kathy and I are sisters. She tests positive, but I do not. I still just follow this chart.
Well, that's the next row.
Well, that's the next row. That's the row below, because that's the quarantine.
Okay.
Not to be confused with isolation. Okay. Okay, I know. It is ridiculously confusing. I actually had a dream about it the other night. Is that bad? Yeah. Yeah. So the quarantine does talk about what a close contact to a positive is. And so that would be within 6 feet for 15 minutes or more, or a household contact. Okay? And there are exceptions to within 6 feet, and that would be in the K-12 indoor classroom or structured outdoor setting where masks can be observed. Close contact definition excludes students who are between 3 to 6 feet of an infected student where both of the students were wearing properly fitted masks.
So Karen, who's making the exception?
Pardon me?
Who's making the exception? Who's approving the exceptions here?
The exception came from the Office of Public Health.
No, I'm saying at the moment in time, because this is all subjective. You're saying in K-12 indoor classrooms or structured outdoor settings where masks can be observed, close contact definition. So in terms of who's observing, who's doing the observation?
We've been doing that since the beginning of the year, and we have, the principal goes down, and we have seating charts for every classroom and bus charts for every bus ride. And the principal then talks to the teacher, and they tell us if all students were masked appropriately. The biggest challenges we have are the lunchroom and the bus. But for every class, they have to have their seating charts done. And if they change their seats for whatever reason, because sometimes teachers do throughout the year, they have to have them down in the office. And so everything's shared on private drive, and it can be accessed from home or in school.
So for students then who are a close contact with symptoms, so first of all, they should be tested for COVID and isolate until the results are known. And then a positive test result, with a positive test result, the student may return to school after 24 hours with no fever and resolving symptoms. And again, here's where it goes from 10 days to 5 days, and masks worn day 6 to 10. If they have a negative test result, so they're a close contact, they get tested, test result is negative, they quarantine for 5 days after last exposure. Now this is with symptoms. They quarantine for 5 days after last exposure. Masks are worn around others for days 6 to 10, and we follow the sick policy. So in other words, you don't come back to school unless you're fever-free for 24 hours, you're not vomiting, blah, blah, blah. So we're following that sick policy.
So quick question, with symptoms returning to school, masks worn around others days 6 through 10, how are we handling lunches where they would be unmasked?
You can't do it. It's imperfect. For lunches, they're allowed to take their masks off.
Okay, one more question. Sorry. The students, if they're, are they, when you say from the date of the test, can they get tested no matter what in this with the school district? Because, for example, I tried to get a test for like
Very hard.
siblings, and it's like 6 days before you can even get tested. So, like, how does that play into here?
Well, that's a whole nother subject. We'll talk about tests to stay momentarily, but there's simply not enough tests to to accommodate everything, so there are specific instances where we will be testing.
So with no symptoms, without symptoms, but a close contact with no symptoms, they quarantine for 5 days after last exposure. Now, this is what the recommendations are, and as I said, we'll get to our test to stay. The recommendations are quarantine for 5 days as opposed to 10 days. Testing is recommended on day 5 after the exposure, with masks worn days 6 to 10. If on day 5 they get a positive result, they may return to school after 5 days after the specimen was collected. Masks are worn around others days 6 to 10. And again, if symptoms develop during the 5 days, then you revert to the testing positive with symptoms. And that's the column to the row above to the left. Okay? Household contacts may require further investigation, but are to follow the above guidelines. So in the past, if you were a household contact, you may have had to quarantine for, what was it, 24 days?
As long as 24 days, depending upon when the test was and when symptoms may have appeared. The longest it could have been was 24.
This is shortening it considerably. And the rationale behind all of that was that they have actually had time to study the spread of the virus and have discovered that it is most virulent in the first 5 days.
This without symptoms positive test result can still wind up being 10 days, however, total.
What they're asking also is that we monitor symptoms for 10 days. And again, if symptoms develop, then we follow the school, return to school for close contact with symptoms, and that's the column to the left. Okay, now, here's where the next part comes in. So you can do all of that without symptoms, or we do have test to stay. And that's where test to stay kicks in. So a student can participate in test to stay, or what's called modified quarantine, for 5 days after, it shouldn't be after, for school, bus, or school-related activities or exposure. Okay? So it is not, so to answer the question, if they were exposed at home or outside of school, we don't do test to stay. It's only for school-related, bus-related, school activity-related exposures.
And why?
Because that's the agreement with CHOP and the agreement with OPH in order for us to get the testing.
Okay, because they don't want us just to become the
Yeah,
first to test.
Correct.
and the supply will.
Understood.
Supply, and you'd also have to be asking proof of the family, like people could just be asking for the test, right? I could imagine that'd be an administrative
Yeah.
Yep.
top.
So
like-
the goal is to, again, we're the ones being responsible for our infection rate here and trying to mitigate that and make sure that students who are in school are healthy to be here and are not placing others at risk, and that we are not sending students home because they have symptoms that may replicate COVID when in fact it's not.
Okay, and so based on what Kathy said and what we just talked about, I assume that means that I could test to stay if I'm the student, but then we're not going to test the rest of the family. It's just the student. So if I'm exposed in if I'm exposed here in the classroom, I have the option of testing. Is it daily?
Well, it's not daily,
Okay,
so I'll get to that.
all right. But just to go back to what
It would just
Kathy
be you.
said, we would not then continue to test the child's family, just the child, just who we're responsible for within
Correct.
our, okay.
So we would test for test to stay if the following things are met. If the parent gives permission to complete a COVID rapid antigen test using the schedule that has been put forth by CHOP and the Office of Public Health. Now, prior to reducing the time home to 5 days, it was days within 24 hours of the exposure, then again on day 3, then on day 5, and then on day 7, and then finally to get out of test to stay by between 8 and 10, days 8 and 10. But because we've reduced the amount of time for quarantine, we would then be testing within the first 24 hours of notification, and then day 3, and then if the next, not the next day, but the day after, and if that's day 5, that would be it. If it's day 3, we would then wait another day. Students can remain in school if they are negative. So this morning I tested 4 students who were exposed. Their parents brought them in because we didn't want them riding on the bus if we didn't know if they were positive. They came directly to our quarantine room here, and parents waited. We tested them. They waited 15 minutes. They were all negative. They went to class. Whereas before, they would have had to stay home. Now, today was their day 4 since exposure. So we're not going to test them tomorrow, even though testing is recommended day 5. We'll test them day 6 to get out of the test to stay modified quarantine.
So if day 3 or 5 is on a weekend, you just bump everything back one day?
If it falls out over the weekend, we'll test them day 6.
Okay.
For the
It's,
next day they come in.
We've been doing that since November. We
Correct.
started, I think, the week before Thanksgiving break. And so it's worked very well. It definitely reduced the bus quarantines. Karen's doing such a great job with this. Just be prepared. There's probably new guidance coming out. I'd love to tell you I was kidding, but I have a feeling they're going to modify when it said the day of notification. I think they're going to get rid of days 1 and the day 1 is the day of notification. It's then going to be day 4, 5, or 6. They'll just get rid of day 3.
Any day between day 4 and 6.
Yeah. It's
what
going
it's
to
going
be,
to
and I think that my opinion is that's because there's a dearth of tests. So that as long as you're asymptomatic, it'll just be day 1, day 5. So if we can, we've been asking for to help with the pressure of the buses. I mean, we're looking at GPS on the bus, how long we're on the bus. It's really getting challenging. Sorry, Karen, you're doing a great job. Keep going.
Initially, the test to stay was only for students who were partially vaccinated or not vaccinated. However, in light of and also at a parent request for students who are vaccinated, we are testing students if they've been exposed, when they come in, within 24 hours. So certainly any parent can request. Certainly any parent can say no. But if they don't give us permission, then the children have to remain home and follow this column, but up here. So they stay home. Now, there are some exceptions to this because what would it be if there weren't exceptions? So if an individual is vaccinated, okay, you do not need to quarantine. If you've been vaccinated after exposure, and when I say vaccinated, they mean fully vaccinated. So that means if you're able, first of all, you have to go through the first 2 series, the first and second shot, and then the booster, and then 2 weeks following the booster. However, if the booster has not been made available yet, then for, 48 hours, they said, no, you have to have the booster, and then they backed off of that. So, it's like when I hear my phone ding, I'm truly afraid to
Yeah,
look at
that
it.
changed from a Friday to a Monday. That changed
Yeah,
from a Friday to a Monday.
Yeah, that went from January 3rd to January 6th.
So fully vaccinated means whatever you are able to get, you've gotten them all.
That is correct. Although now the booster is out.
Right.
However, they've not had the opportunity to have the 2 weeks.
Okay. But anybody who can't get the booster, 2 shots is
But
enough.
we are still, testing those kids because in essence, they're partially vaccinated.
I
So
would
we are
suspect by September, they'll remove the term fully vaccinated and just say boosted, meaning that you've had the 2
Right.
plus a boost.
Yeah.
But right now, yes, everybody is, for what you're eligible to get, that's fully vaccinated.
So fully vaccinated and 2 weeks beyond your last shot.
Correct.
Okay.
And of course, you have to remain asymptomatic. And what they're saying is you have to get tested, or the recommendation. There's no mandate to get tested. All of this is a recommendation. To get tested 5 days after the last exposure and wear a mask around others for 10 days. So instead of the 6 to 10, if you're asymptomatic and you're fully vaccinated, you don't have to quarantine as long as you are asymptomatic and you are wearing your mask wherever you are, whenever you are exposed to people. And of course, monitor for symptoms. And if you become symptomatic, by all means, we will test you. So, again, given the variant, Omicron is so virulent and so transmissible that, while we do have tests, if we're able to, we will. The last thing we want to do is have a kid go home when it may be allergies. Or it may be, so, and we know that there are some doctors who, will give the differential diagnosis, but there are a lot of parents who are having difficulty getting appointments with their doctors to get that differential diagnosis. So we're trying to be understanding about that. Another exception, the COVID-19 recent infection exception, people who have had a positive diagnostic test for COVID-19 within the last 90 days before their last exposure do not need to quarantine if they remain asymptomatic. This is, again, with the assumption that people are immune because they have had the infection, but the immunity seems to wear off after 90 days. However, they do need to wear a mask. And that concludes. Do not ask me a question.
Right.
I have one question that's unrelated to what you talked about, but
You do understand that I will make up the answer if I don't.
well, it's actually, okay. So I've received a couple of emails that someone in my child's class has tested positive, and the gist of the end of all the emails I've gotten so far has said your child is not at risk, right? And it was not close contact. Was close contact, but was whatever.
Right.
So I don't have to worry about it, but he was in close contact. When you, at the high school level, do they take into account who they might have sat with at lunch or any after-school activities? If a student who tests positive, do they take those things into
You should
account?
have seating charts for all the lunchrooms. One of the
Even at the high school?
and one of the things about high school students too, if you notice, they are habitual, right? They have the areas where they sit. They may sit maybe at different sides of the table, but they generally sit at the same table with their peers. So the only area where we wouldn't have the seating charts is we have the big tent out in the courtyard, but they're outside, so there's far less risk there. And we have heaters going now. I'm not sure how many kids are out there today, but they were out there through the winter break with the heaters we provided. So activities, we do take. RJ keeps track of with the coaches. There's all the rosters, and The coaches have been instructed on how to conduct their practices and where we have kids in different sections, so we know who they're in close proximity with. It's mostly challenging during a contest because you could have up to, depending on the sport, you could have 10, 15 kids involved at any given time. Swimming is particularly challenging, so we actually put in some tougher rules recently because we had some cases on the swimming team, so we've limited the number of kids in the lanes because they're obviously unmasked. And so the coach has done a great job with that. He and RJ worked on that together. But activities are tough, without a doubt.
One of the things that we did put into place that helps us make more informed decisions about what we're recommending to the parents, our nurses had been inundated, and I do mean inundated, with parents just sending emails or phone calls to let them know that their child had been exposed, or their child or somebody in the family was infected, whatever. And it was so cumbersome trying to go through all of these emails because there were times when nurses were copied on things and somebody else responded. We have asked, nurses are now have an away message when a parent sends them an email. And what it does is it sends them to a link, which is a parent questionnaire. So that parents can fill out all the information that we need to make an informed decision. And, with including, please take a picture of your child's vaccination card and send it to us. Because although nurses can look at the state registry and see if a student has been vaccinated, it takes time. And that takes time away from either seeing the students, or I can tell you our nurses are working 24/7. And it's just, there's not enough hours in the day. So this has been extraordinarily, we just started it the end of last week. And something went home, the administrators sent something home to parents, sent them to where the link is. That questionnaire then populates an Excel spreadsheet for each of the buildings so that we can see how many kids in each building are affected by this. So we're trying to keep the data up to date, and we're also our nurses are trying to make consistent and informed decisions as to what to advise parents.
Very thorough job, Mrs. Burke.
And I am done.
Jess, adult evening school?
Now for a lighter topic. I promise not to give you any if-then scenarios for this one. I just wanted to follow up from the last meeting where I gave everybody here an update on the fall session. We're now starting our winter-spring session for adult evening school. Hopefully you got the brochure right before the winter break, and a lot of our classes are starting this week and will continue on through the winter months and into the spring. We had so far, we've had about 288 registrations, and some of those may be duplicates, but that's a good number. Was not sure what to expect given everything with COVID, but people seem willing and ready to get back in there and do things. So we sent the brochure out, we promoted it via email, social media, and we've been handling calls and registrations ever since that time. And also meeting with people who have expressed interest in teaching new classes. So, we've got some interesting ones coming down the pike that I hope people will be interested in. Some of the new ones for this session include card making and scrapbooking, which we hadn't offered before. There's a money management course, composting 101, even some, ditch the diet type programs, for people who are looking for more exercise wellness type themes. And we also did a survey to our fall participants. I had mentioned that we were going to do that, and we did send out a link. The return response rate wasn't great. We got about 48 responses, but of those responses, the feedback was pretty positive. The areas where we need to improve in have to do more with facilities and people feeling like, for example, the water aerobics class. because of COVID, locker rooms are closed. There was, some concern about not being able to use the locker room. So things like that were coming across. But overall, the instructors we're working with received high marks, and it was really great to see that people were, embracing being able to participate in classes again. I think if there's, I guess that's pretty much everything that I wanted to, share at this point. Does anybody have questions or things they wanted to ask about? No? Okay. Thank you. And then I'm going to pass the mic to Kim because she wanted to give an update. Well, maybe I can't pass it. I don't know. Just an update on the website because, as you all know, we were having website challenges. So she'll provide an update on that.
This is just short. I just wanted to let you know kind of what happened. The final site had an attack on their data center, and their response, their disaster response protocols had them take everything down. So this affected literally thousands of school sites across the globe. They have I think it was 5,000 school sites. So it's a lot. And their third-party forensic engineers have assured us that none of the data was compromised or stolen. We don't really have much data up there anyway. We do have names and email addresses for e-Friday folders and that kind of thing. But it also kind of showed an advantage that we have, and that is that we do have, kind of like when you don't want to have your president and vice president on the same plane, we do have multiple ways to get a hold of parents. And so it really kind of showed that what we have is really good because we can email through the website, but we can also email through Blackboard. So I think it just kind of proved that we have a good system in place as far as communication is concerned. And I think that's it.
But that nothing on Final Site or our website is connected to PowerSchool, so they would not have access to student demographic data, addresses, names, age, anything like that, correct?
Nothing like that.
Okay.
And even the email addresses don't all have names attached.
Right. No, that's understandable. And we all get spam email, but I just want to make sure they're completely separate. Good.
Thank you. Are there any public comments that have arisen since our wonderful meeting?
There is no public comments.
Are there any board comments or questions before we adjourn?
Can you explain this chart again? Can you please leave?
Meeting is adjourned. Thank you very much.